Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Russia and Ukraine intensify fight over Avdiivka, another ruined city. When a man began shooting in Maine, some froze while others ran. Now they're left with questions. Hamas vows full force after Israel steps up Gaza ground operations. Israel and Palestine, is war the only way out? Ukraine fights two-front war against Russia and graft. Russia and Ukraine intensify fight over Avdiivka, another ruined city. Washington Post. Russia and Ukraine are engaged in a fierce battle for control of the city of Avdiivka, with Russia hoping to encircle and seize control of the well-fortified city to the north of occupied Donetsk. The fighting has escalated significantly, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed that Russia had lost an entire brigade of fighters, but this could not be independently verified. The White House National Security Council warned that Russia's attack on Avdiivka was a sobering reminder that Russian President Vladimir Putin wants to capture all of Ukraine. The battle for Avdiivka is reminiscent of the months-long battle for Bakhmut, in which tens of thousands of Russian and Ukrainian soldiers died over control of a largely destroyed city. Avdiivka has been a target since 2014, and its capture could open up a 30 to 40-mile stretch of the front line, creating a gateway for Russia to other key cities in the region. The city has been left in ruins, with the water and electricity supply cut off, and most inhabitants living underground and relying on humanitarian aid. Hospital director Vitaly Sitnik has described Avdiivka as a city where people don't care anymore when the shelling starts. When a man began shooting in Maine, some froze while others ran. Now they're left with questions. Associated Press. The first loud noise 10-year-old Tony Asalin heard sounded like the thwack of a ball being hit hard across a pool table. She thought the second might have been someone dropping a bowling ball. The gunfire and violence destroyed an innocent night of bowling and socializing and turned it into tragedy. People gunned down bowling for strikes and spares, throwing beanbags, shooting pool, having beers with friends, working the night shift. For Asalin and her mother, Tammy, the situation was especially gut-wrenching. A coach hustled the 10-year-old and several of her youth league teammates outside. An employee hid some of the children in a backroom office while other workers barricaded themselves in a freezer. She became separated from her mother, who initially stood frozen as others fled. Turning to run, Tammy Asalin tripped over some bowling ball bags and took a hard fall before hiding behind a flipped-over table and calling 911. Authorities said the first of multiple calls came in at 6:56 p.m. Four plainclothes officers who were at a nearby shooting range arrived a minute and a half after the first call, followed by uniformed officers less than 3 minutes later. Hamas vows full force after Israel steps up Gaza ground operations. The Globe and Mail. Hamas has said its fighters in Gaza are ready to confront Israeli attacks with full force after Israel's military widened its air and ground attacks on the Palestinian enclave. The Palestinian militant group had said its fighters were clashing with Israeli troops in areas near the border with Israel after Israel reported intensified attacks in Gaza. Israel and Palestine, is war the only way out? Al Jazeera. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip could escalate into a ground invasion, a diplomatic solution, or the reoccupation of the territory by Israel, according to analysts. A ground invasion of Gaza would likely result in a prolonged war with high civilian casualties. However, the scale of violence against Palestinians in this conflict is already greater than in previous assaults on Gaza, with Israel targeting entire streets and neighborhoods. The response to Hamas's attack has been a real act of vengeance from Israel, based on carpet bombing Gaza. A diplomatic solution is the only way the conflict will progress, but this is hindered by Arab countries' normalization with Israel and the militaristic approach of the U.S. A third possible scenario could be the reoccupation of Gaza or the expulsion of all Palestinians from the territory, in line with Israel's long-term aims of having the most land with the fewest Palestinians. However, Palestinians have been resistant to the idea of evacuating the Strip, preferring to stay in their homes and die there if necessary. In any case, Palestinians in Gaza will be worse off than ever before, with the blockade unlikely to be loosened and the majority of people dependent on food handouts. The changing public discourse in the West on the plight of Palestinians is gaining ground, but there will be no real winners in this conflict. Ukraine fights two-front war against Russia and graft. Nikkei Asia. Ukrainian investigative journalist Yuri Nikolov has uncovered corruption in the country's military procurement process, leading to the dismissal of Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov. Nikolov found anomalies in customs clearance records for military jackets purchased by the Ministry of Defense, suspecting that the goods were actually summer jackets falsely marketed as winter gear. He also uncovered allegations that the defense ministry paid 3 times the market price for food for soldiers on the front lines. Nikolov's reporting has prompted other media outlets to resume their own investigations, and civil society groups have launched anti-graft campaigns. Corruption in Ukraine has long been a problem, but it is now drawing more attention as the country fights against Russia and seeks Western support. A poll conducted in July found that 61% of Ukrainians believe corruption in army procurement has been an obstacle to defeating Russia. While President Volodymyr Zelensky's approval rating remains high, 78% of respondents in another survey said he is responsible for Ukraine's corruption problem. The struggle with corruption is likely to affect the course of the war, as the U.S. Congress recently blocked funding for Ukraine due to concerns about corruption, mystery motive, missing gunmen, and anxious manhunt, key questions around the Maine shooting. Yahoo! The small town of Lewiston, Maine, is struggling to come to terms with the worst mass shooting in the state's history. 18 people, including the gunman, Robert Card, were killed in the shootings at a bowling alley and a restaurant on Wednesday night. 3 others died later in hospital. Card's body was found in woodland close to a recycling facility where he had recently lost his job. His motive for the attacks remains unknown. Officials have refused to disclose the contents of a note left by Card. His family say he had been suffering from mental health problems and had recently started hearing voices. His former wife divorced him in 2007. Maine has lax gun laws and no red flag law, which can be used to prevent individuals from purchasing guns if they are feared to be a danger to themselves or others. On Thursday, Maine Senator Susan Collins said that a yellow flag law, in place in the state, should have been used to restrict Card's access to guns. U.S. shoots down drone in Iraq amid Middle East tensions. Deutsche Welle. U.S. forces have shot down a drone near Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. The attempted drone attack followed U.S. strikes on 2 military facilities in eastern Syria. The U.S. claims that these facilities are used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated groups, which are responsible for attacks on American forces in the region. Pro-Iranian militias have claimed more than a dozen attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria in recent weeks. In addition, influential religious leader Muqtada al-Sadr has called for the closure of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad due to U.S. support for Israel in its conflict with Hamas. White House says airstrikes in Syria proved U.S. holding Iran accountable. Yahoo! The U.S. has claimed that it carried out airstrikes on 2 facilities in eastern Syria, which were being used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. The White House stated that these actions were taken in response to recent attacks on U.S. troops in the area. Officials said that the strikes were intended to send a message to Iran that such attacks would not be tolerated. Gunman suspected of killing 18 in Maine found dead near his former worksite. The Sydney Morning Herald. The man suspected of killing 18 people and injuring 13 in a shooting rampage in Lewiston, Maine, has been found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The suspect, Robert Card, was an Army Reserve sergeant with a history of mental illness. The shootings took place at a bowling alley and bar, before Card fled the scene. A manhunt ensued, involving hundreds of officers from various agencies. Card's body was found near Lisbon City by a recycling center where he had recently been fired. The shootings and subsequent manhunt have shocked the community of Lewiston. Maine mass shooting suspect has been found dead, ending search that put entire state on edge. Yahoo! The suspect wanted in connection with Wednesday's fatal shootings at a bar and a bowling alley in Maine has been found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The bodies of Robert Card, 40, of Bowdoin, Maine, and his son were found in a home in Lisbon, Maine, on Friday night by a tactical team, according to the Maine State Police. A search was launched for Card after he allegedly entered a bar in Lewiston, Maine, and opened fire, killing 18 people and wounding 3 others. Authorities say Card had firearms training and opened fire at the bar and the bowling alley. Following the shootings, authorities issued murder warrants for Card, who had a criminal record that included charges of domestic violence and drug offenses. Card's family has said he had been hospitalized for mental health issues in the past. Maine Governor Janet Mills described the shootings as a senseless act of violence and ordered all state flags to be lowered to half-staff. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six from the Sixth Dimension, bringing you the latest news from around the world. Today, we witnessed intense battles in Avdiivka between Russia and Ukraine, a tragic mass shooting in Maine, escalating tensions between Israel and Hamas, corruption issues in Ukraine's military, and drone attacks in Iraq. Let's dive deeper into these stories. In Avdiivka, Russia and Ukraine are locked in a fierce fight for control of the city. The battle is reminiscent of the long and devastating conflict over Bakhmut. The capture of Avdiivka could provide Russia with a gateway to other key cities in the region. The situation is dire, with the city left in ruins and its inhabitants relying on humanitarian aid for survival. Moving on to Maine, the state witnessed a tragic mass shooting that left 18 people dead. The shooter's motive remains unknown, but mental health issues may have played a role. This incident raises questions about gun control laws and the need for measures to prevent such tragedies from occurring. In the Middle East, tensions between Israel and Hamas continue to escalate. A ground invasion, a diplomatic solution, or even reoccupation of the territory by Israel are possible outcomes. The violence against Palestinians in this conflict has already reached alarming levels, and a diplomatic solution is hindered by various factors. Meanwhile, corruption issues have emerged in Ukraine's military, with investigations uncovering irregularities in procurement processes. Corruption has long plagued Ukraine, but it is now gaining more attention as the country fights against Russia and seeks support from the West. The fight against corruption is crucial, as it affects the course of the war and international support. Lastly, drone attacks in Iraq have heightened tensions in the region. The U.S. claims that the targeted facilities were used by Iran's Revolutionary Guard and affiliated groups responsible for attacks on American forces. Pro-Iranian militias have been carrying out attacks on U.S. bases in recent weeks, and calls for the closure of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad have been made. These stories highlight the complex and challenging issues our world faces. It is crucial for us to stay informed and engaged, as the decisions made by world leaders affect us all. Now, I turn to you, my dear audience. What are your thoughts on these recent events? Do you have any questions? Let's discuss and explore together in this ever-changing world. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.